So for this week's episode of Industrial Sage, we're going to change the format a little bit. So what we'd like to do is every quarter do a quarterly recap. So we're at the last week of September. Can't believe we're already moving into October. And we'd like to kind of take a backwards look and pull out some highlights and some really key snippets that we've had in the previous episodes. So that's what we're going to do this episode for Industrial Sage. Stay tuned. Let's get this going. I'm Danny Gonzalez, and this is Industrial Sage. All right, so welcome to this highlight recap as we were going to recap third quarter as we move into fourth again. This is craziness. So we launched this thing back a couple of months ago, and the very first episodes we talked about, episode 1 and 2, were really, what is digital marketing? So we kind of took a 30,000 foot view to look at that. We looked at the differences between B2B and B2C campaigns, because while there is crossover, there's definitely differences. And then the other area that we addressed was if a company was wanting to transition from traditional to digital, bring in some more of those digital marketing practices, what are some of those key questions you need to be asking yourselves? So we'll go ahead and play a couple key snippets from those episodes, and then we'll move on to episode 3.
If you really wanted to kind of break it down, what would you consider digital marketing?
It's everything, actually. And that's sort of a hokey way of saying it, but it's the truth. I mean, anything that's conveyed through digital channels is digital marketing. People are going to argue over SEO, PPC, SEM, that type of thing, versus content marketing, versus doing display ads, all different things. But to me, anything that can be run across the digital channel, and more importantly, anything that can be measured, is something that I think is key for digital marketing. I think where people maybe get tripped up is the idea that everything is needed by them, or two, I only need to do this one thing and that's all I need to do. You hear folks talk about inbound marketing and they're like, inbound, it's all content marketing, content. We don't need to do ads, that's something totally different. And I think that may or may not be a good thing, but looking at it that way without proof and analysis, that's probably where people get tripped up the most. So it's a broad range of things, and what works is dependent on the situation.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, here, it's kind of funny because I admittedly, definitely get a little confused sometimes when you hear, content marketing and digital marketing and integrated marketing and all these different things, and I feel like they have there's a lot of overlap, and sometimes they kind of fall in the same camp. But I guess if we look at it, maybe there's a couple different areas we might be able to break down in there. So you mentioned one before, so like SEO, SEM, PPC, that kind of thing. So. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess maybe we take a step back first too and say, we're really trying to look at the B2B market. And even farther down, we're looking at a manufacturing and industrial, which is sort of, in a sense, a fancy way of saying we're marketing to engineers. Or maybe they're not engineers today, but they had that upbringing too. So we need to look at it that way, because when we start talking about SEO and SEM and PPC, it's sort of, you start to look at it and say, okay, I'm thinking about it from a B2C standpoint, and I'm going to plug all this money into hitting this huge market in the United States, and that may not be what we're trying to go for. So I think you use that backdrop of, I have a technical industrial product or service that I'm selling to people that need knowledge and information about the value it's providing to them. And start there before you look at the channel.
That makes a lot of sense there. It's funny too. You bring up the whole when we talk about PPC, for example, or pay-per-click, if you're not familiar with that, with like a Google AdWords campaign, but how that really differs from B2C versus B2B. I mean, with B2C, it's much more widely used and known, and I think, in most cases, a lot more effective than you would see in a B2B case. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I agree, and I think it takes testing. So I'm just going to use this one example. We don't have to do a whole show about SEO and PPC today. But I had a campaign that we were doing, trying to hit the entire market in the whole world. It was 4,500 people.
Okay.
So we knew who the target was, and there was 4,500 folks out there that were interested in this product or had the capability to buy. They were qualified targets. And so the folks that started it wanted to do an AdWords campaign, which I was glad to do. Did the keyword planner and everything, put it together. Well, when you have 4,500 people, the odds of them searching on Google on a regular basis for the product that we were selling is really close to zero. And we proved it out very well by having a big budget and almost no traffic to it, with the exception of some things that leaked in from the side from a kid doing a paper somewhere or something like that.
Well, and there's a key thing that I'd like to kind of circle back on. Maybe a little bit. I'll drop a little nugget in right now. You mentioned though that okay, you found that out though, but you found that out. Okay, sure. So a lot of money was spent on it from a budget standpoint, but a big difference between traditional versus digital is that you were able to actually track that and say, okay, this didn't work.
Yeah.
So we're able to find things that do work and the things that don't. So anyways, like I said, I'll kind of package that up. We'll get into that here in just a little bit more. But I
think you make a great point. I mean, when we talk about what is digital marketing, it's something you can measure.
So to recap, we've got the top 4 questions that you need to ask before you jump into a digital marketing campaign. The first one being is figure out what that budget is. You're going to need to spend stuff on lead gen tactics and certainly some different platforms and technology you might need. Figuring out who your audience is. Those personas, not just, okay, we're targeting XYZ person, but really drill into those verticals, look at the people that you're going to be targeting inside of that. The next one is figuring out what their challenges are so that you can that'll help influence the content that you need to be able to make that's going to be relevant to them. And then that last piece is, developing that content and figuring out what the distribution methods and the technologies are to be able to get, quote unquote, eyeballs on your content.
So in the third episode, we really touched on these great magical things called trade shows, which everyone still does. But there's been a little bit of a perception that maybe trade shows aren't as effective as they once were. And there was a key question: should you still be doing them? And we answered that, and the answer was, well, yes. So let's pull out some of these snippets and get an understanding of why they're still effective.
If you've got prospects and you've got leads there who might be there, making sure it's a great opportunity to be able to, even if they're not going to be, it's a great touch point to be able to say, hey, we're going to be here or whatever. And then making sure that there's some sort of relevant offer or content to really drive that value to actually, when you're there, to come stop by your booth and come talk with you.
Yeah, especially if you're like doing something at the show.
Right.
You can just say pre-gaming. You can sort of just put that out up front to let people know. That's a great reason to email them and say, hey, we're doing this, or maybe we're on the platform speaking one day at this stage. I mean, that's a great excuse to email them like 3 times ahead of time, because I'm not promoting my product. Especially if I'm up there with other people, I'm doing a panel or something like that. Right. It's a great opportunity to say, hey, just to remind you, we're going to be here doing this, and then afterwards we're doing drinks at this bar or whatever it is, and we'd love for you to come along. I think it's the opportunity for sales too. We've talked before about sales enablement. There's a piece of sales enablement there that says, okay, my sales folks have talked to these people, and they may be at the show, and this is a great way that we can write semi-personalized emails coming from that salesperson to personally invite the person to the booth, especially if they've talked about stuff and you're using like a Salesforce or any CRM, and you've got fields of like, here's where their pain point is, here's the thing they want to learn more about, whatever is in there. You can write those semi-personalized emails. It's a great opportunity to say, hey, Joe, this is Tom over at XYZ company. Don't know if you're going to this trade show, but we're going to be there, and we've talked before about you have this issue. Love for you to stop by for 15 minutes and we can dig into it deeper. Who wouldn't show up for that, right?
And actually, so the email thing, I'm just curious, that would be a little bit more of a personalized email. Now, would you be talking about like using merge tags to be able to send sort of a mass like bulk email to everybody, or is that still each salesperson would send like a one-on-one kind of
I think it depends on the technology you're using. And some, you might merge from a database into Outlook, maybe like a Salesforce part out where they're integrated like that. You can bring variable fields in and put that in there, so you know that you bring in their salesperson, you bring in some of the notes from the salesperson into different fields on the email. You can do that. The key is just to let them know that you're there and that you want to hear about their situation.
Perfect. So communicate, provide value there, help to get them to drive to the booth or whatever event you may be putting on, whether it's you're speaking on a panel or you've got a cocktail hour afterwards or something like that.
In the fourth episode, we had a really fantastic interview with John Guttrell from Pragmatic Marketing. And we really touched on that alignment between product managers and marketing and really sales and some of the key challenges around there. We're seeing a lot of companies sometimes will say, hey, we're going to develop some new products because we think they have some awesome features and benefits, and kind of ignoring talking to the actual customer or using feedback to get an understanding as, let's develop products that are really addressing customer needs and just and go in the opposite direction. So there's really key snippets and some really great highlights we pulled out here. You definitely want to watch this.
So bringing it back, because a lot of our folks are in the digital marketing space, and oftentimes they tend to get involved with the process and execution. And there's, you can do what I do, which is I just walk into the meetings and show up there, and I just have a saying, is that I never want somebody to use the term, let me catch you up on it. I want to have already known, but that's because I'm a control freak, and maybe not everybody does that. So from a political standpoint, what can the digital marketing team do farther back up the process to get involved, to provide assistance and show their value to the marketing and product management team?
Well, I mean, is it really just the digital people, or is it the product people too? Or is it management? Let's empower our digital marketers to leave the building, right? Let's go actually know these people and have some context to the metrics, right? Have some insights of our targets, those personas that we got to go tell stories and delight. And so I think part of it is, even though you may not have a more strategic role or how your organization and your processes are designed, maybe you sit in a spot of the business that is seen as tactical. It doesn't mean you don't need knowledge and context.
Absolutely.
And so I think part of that is, go out and learn about your marketplace, not just about your discipline. Because I'm confident those digital marketers are successful, they know their discipline. And they often are doing the A/B test, kind of, I call it the A/B test kind of loop to figure out, do I really know my market?
It's really, because really at the end of the day, when you're selling, it's really, you should be solving your customers' challenges, right? That product should come from a challenge or a pain or an issue, not, hey, we think this is really cool. This is an amazing, we love this. That's awesome that we love this as from a product team. Do our customers love us, or do they need it? What does this solve? And let's start from the back. Anyways.
And I think when you start with the product, you're too late, right? I have a technology, I have something, it's X.
Right.
How can I apply X in a meaningful way to make money? No, what do they need, and then build X? What is that gap that you're going to satisfy and differentiate against? But I think the problem you talk about is not uncommon. Build it and they will come, right? And we're all great technologists in many markets. I'll tell you this, technology's easy. It's finding the problem that's credible, that's viable, that you can turn into a business. And so, figure out what the opportunity is, figure out what the math is from an investment strategy, then go to the work to solve the problem. I think is the best way to mitigate risk, mitigate failures, and I guess learn from your market, and almost like a lean startup, iterate, test, validate, test, validate.
And the fifth episode, this is a really good one. So we've gone through a couple episodes on digital marketing, and likely you're sitting there saying, gosh, wow, we need to be looking at this, we need to be doing more. But then there's a little bit of a challenge organizationally in terms of getting the buy-in. So what are some best practices on how to do that? And this episode was perfect on that. We gave you some really great information on how to position it and how to maybe start that toe-dipping approach into digital marketing and really build out that case so that you can be all things digital.
It's the age-old question on how to really get organizational buy-in. This is, I know, a big challenge that a lot of people face and focus, because let's be honest, a lot of people are super resistant to change. A lot of this stuff is new, and even though there are proven models out there, it's one of those things that it's just, this is the way that we've done it, and this is the way, I'm preaching to the choir, everybody here knows this. So how do we solve that challenge? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. I think first of all, you got to treat it like a business process, and number one thing is you have to know what you're talking about, the statistics of it. Having the numbers. I think I see two things personally that would come across, and that is either you go and you argue to your boss, we need to do it because everybody else does it. That's one. Or we need to do it because our competitors are doing it. And that's number two. Both might be valid arguments, but without the numbers behind it, we don't really know. We're sort of flying blind. So I think it's a good idea to go out there, find out other people's success stories. If they are parallel to what you're doing, same type of business, same type of sales channel, that kind of thing. Don't go and take a B2C company that's selling Skittles online, and then you're going to sell, you know, $1 million project or something like that. Not the same thing. So get success stories that are similar so that the management team can draw parallels to them and understand that. And then I think the biggest thing, if you're going to use the competitor as a model and say, you know, our competitors are doing it, then you need to answer the question that the management team is going to ask about your campaign, which is, great, they're doing it, what are they getting out of it? And if your answer is, to be honest, I don't know, I mean, that they might be throwing good money after bad because somebody else was doing it, and so now they're going to do it too. So have that information. There's a lot of great tools. I use SEMrush personally. There's other ones out there that do it, that look at, like from a PPC standpoint, that tell me what my competitors are running, all the way down to the actual ad. You know, do that competitive analysis, see what kind of money they're putting into it, what they're getting out of it.
Right. So the 6th and the 7th episodes was a 2-part series with Lily Biting from Stanley Black & Decker. She really brought in some great information on PPC or pay-per-click and what that is. There's been a lot of misinformation on that. Most people think it's just exclusive to Google AdWords, but it's really not. There's a lot of other strategies and there's a lot of other information, and there's a lot of great ways you can use it, but there's also a lot of pitfalls in there. So she did a fantastic job of kind of walking us through that and really helping to shed some light on some of that misinformation and set up some key strategies for success.
One question that's probably good to bring up now too is, we've gotten the basics, we've gotten to understand the difference between B2B and B2C. This might be really basic. What are some of the terms that people need to get familiar with to understand what the inner workings are going on, what they need to pay attention to?
There are so many letters just crammed together.
Can we just start with the first 50?
Right. And actually some of the letters and KPIs is more letters for you. Some of the KPIs vary depending on the platform. So an impression load in Facebook is a little bit different than an impression load in AdWords than it would be in DoubleClick, for example. So there's a little bit of difference to it. And just be sort of cognizant of that. Some of the most important things, I would say, I am an impression share freak, really. That's what I really pay attention to. And that's a term that's specific to paid search within a major search engine like Bing or Google or Yahoo or any of those.
What is an impression relative to impression load, click-through rate, all that stuff, those metrics?
So an impression period is just how many times something appears. So if it's paid search, it's how many times your little text ad appears. If it's display, it's how many times your little video appears, or excuse me, your image appears. If it's pre-roll, it's how many times your video appears. If it's Facebook, it's how many times whatever you've decided goes in Facebook appears. So in something like Facebook or display, if you're doing kind of broad audience targeting, it can appear as many times as you want, right? There's really no cap, it's not finite. If you're looking at something like retargeting, so you've got a set list of people you can use, or a captive group, maybe it's people coming to your site, that is a finite amount. So you may see more projections of share based on that, because again, think share, finite amount, no share, I mean, it's like a billboard, how many times can you count it being there, right? Yeah. So that would be kind of the difference that you see there. Were there other ones that you wanted me to describe a bit?
If we go over click-through rate, just in terms of like, okay, that's the percentage of the amount of actual clicks that you get from.
And that's when you get charged typically. So there are a couple different ways that you can run pay-per-click. So on the AdWords side, you're always going to be paying for the exact click. Sometimes you may see what's called a CPM model, and that's cost per thousand is what that stands for. So that may be them charging you for pockets of 1,000 of how many 1,000 impressions they're serving up. So you may see that too.
Right. I mean, you'd be using those just depending on what the objective of the campaign is.
Correct.
So maybe an example is if you really just want to build your brand awareness and get out there, you want people to see your name and maybe your display ads, you might want to be looking more at impressions. And that'd be more of an important thing versus I really want to drive people to our website for whatever, a webinar or for whatever that may be. And so that the click-through rate and all that's going to be a little bit more important on that. Is that all right?
Correct. Okay. And again, think about it conceptually differently too. So depending on what kind of business you are, if you are someone who's product-based, so again, back to the example of Nordstrom's, click-through rate's super important for you because you can very clearly trace when somebody engages with your ad and eventually converts to buy something. But at the same time, if you've got somebody who's a customer who's already been to your site, so you cookie them and you're able to keep serving them up that ad, sometimes it's important just to see how many times you've hit them. Maybe you've hit them too much. That can happen. Or what it takes to kind of see that average amount of kind of impression delivery per client per per conversion. So there's a lot of granularity you can really get into, but make sure you identify what you care about before you take a look at these metrics, because there's tons of numbers. And they all kind of click together with each other, and understanding how they work is very critical to seeing what's profitable for you.
The company wants to jump into PPC, what should they do? What are the first steps?
Oh, it's my answer again. It depends. It really depends. So depending on what you want to accomplish, there are a lot of different ways you could go. So I think I mentioned in the last session that we did that an approach you would take from a retail perspective is going to be a lot different than something to just brand aware or to get people to go to certain pages or to mirror a traditional campaign. There are so many different ways you can go. So what I would really start with is identifying what you want. I've worked with clients, I've worked with my own, I've worked with people more on the manufacturing side of things, and so many times I've had meetings with people where they just don't have realistic expectations, and it really works best if you segment everything out and understand what you're going after. That's why so much of pay-per-click, depending on which medium you're using, is set up at a campaign level so you can do different campaigns. So first of all, figure out what's important to you. Figure out what's important to your brand, what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to get more just clicks to the website? Are you trying to get more people to sign up for your newsletter or podcast, which you should subscribe to?
Oh, I like
And I got your plug. There we go. or really what it is you're trying to do. In a B2B situation, like the industry I'm currently working in, it's really about nurturing people and getting them to respond to you and engage with you and understand how your products fit them, right? So figure out what that is first, and then there are a lot of different tools you can use to get to that answer. So keep that in the back of your mind, but be open to what the rest of the market has to say.
So we've talked a little bit about tools and how you go about researching things. Not every marketing department is going to be able to or want to do that.
Some of it's quite expensive too. Yeah.
So now I guess your next option is agency.
Oh man.
How do you pick, do it in-house, take it to an agency?
So my thought on doing it in-house is this. If you're the kind of person who can read a book and then properly wire an entire house up to electrical code, do it in-house. And those people do exist. They do. In one of my previous tenures, I worked for General Motors, and I went to thousands of dealerships I dealt with all over the US and Canada, and I met one person who I was like, you know what, you could handle this.
Okay.
And he had like 2 master's degrees, and one of them was in statistics. So that's why I was like, you know what, I think you got this. You probably don't have to hire out, but it's that level of sophistication. So you can internally hire for that. There are some really good PPC gurus out there. The nice thing about it being an internet-based platform is it's easy to keep in contact with people and keep apprised of new stuff. However, if you're going the agency route, which is also a perfectly valid and healthy way to go, work with somebody who's collaborative, and if they make stuff sound really easy, I'd be extremely leery.
Okay.
Because as we mentioned, the level of granularity and sophistication you can get into with this it's astronomical. I mean, you could really teach a whole graduate level course on this. It's that much detail. So I would say work with somebody who doesn't give you the, oh yeah, we got this, it's fine, because that's concerning, but instead is very collaborative in their approach. Here's you out, here's what your goals are, and also calls you on some of your BS too. you do want someone who does that, because a good pay-per-click manager or someone who's implementing that is the person who says, hey, I know you said this is really important to you. We've wasted thousands of dollars trying to follow this. It's not working. It's not converting. Can we try it maybe on this campaign that is working? Right. So you want that level of conversation, because they're really the ones interpreting and changing and molding this data.
Okay.
Episode 8 was probably one of my favorites because I'm not biased at it at all. I love video. We talked about video and how to really introduce that and use that through your marketing with as a manufacturing and industrial company. There's a lot of applications. There's a lot of use cases, and it's not just, hey, we're going to do a little product video here or this video about us as a company. There's a lot of other nuances and a lot of other use cases. You definitely want to look at this recap to pull out some nuggets of information that were incredibly valuable. No bias.
I can understand people are doing Facebook Live for themselves at home, hanging out and doing that kind of thing. But quality is an important piece. One, let's address the quality part. The other one, though, is when do you use what and when's it appropriate?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. So Yeah, double-edged sword, a little bit, right? So now that we have these capabilities to be able to produce our, your own content. So everyone's got an iPhone, you got your webcam, you can produce these things.
Yeah.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. But there are some areas that I would argue, yes, you should do this. So, for example, if you using like these video messages, this personalized type of video that you would record in an email. Yeah, in my opinion, does not need to be professionally recorded.
Okay.
Because I think a big part of that is there's a sense of it being raw and that it's real.
Yeah.
And so, like a great use case for that is you're at a trade show and you want to follow up with some people and you want to say, hey Bob, we had a great conversation. It was great meeting you last week. We talked about X, Y, Z. I'd love to get on your calendar so we can continue on that conversation. Mm-hmm. What do you think? And that way, it creates that, versus trying to do that professionally. There's just no way you can scale that.
Yeah.
It's just impossible.
That's true.
Unless you have a monumental budget. In case you do, you need to call Optimum. But the reality of it is, it's very hard to scale. So using that, I think, is very important. When you mentioned Facebook Live, it was really interesting. We're actually seeing a lot more, we're seeing the trends to longer form video on Facebook Live that actually, I guess because of Facebook's algorithms, they're actually like preferring that versus maybe because they're pushing Facebook Live right now. Yeah. And so I think with that, it goes all around the content. What is the content you're putting up there and making sure that what you're putting out there is of value. Yeah.
I guess you have a relationship with the people on Facebook, so
right.
It's not that introduction of the funnel. You're farther into it.
Right. The top of the funnel videos need to be as high quality as possible. Okay. Your identity and positioning videos, those videos that are saying who you are as an organization, needs to really reflect how you're trying to position your brand. So the way I like to phrase it is, okay, if your brand was a car, what kind of a car would it be? Okay. So is it a Mercedes? Is it pick a luxury car, or is it a Pinto? Like your training videos, for example. Yeah. We're not making Hollywood major motion pictures here, all right? That's okay, and it can be a little bit more grittier, but there's a certain level of professionalism that you really want to have, even in just the way that the content is presented. Okay. So a lot of times it can be really challenging to really convey how you set up X, Y, Z. And so what we'll see a lot of times is with B2B manufacturers in particular, they're going to shoot their training videos. They know the product backwards and forwards, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you set this up and you do this, and shooting on a can, and they're doing one-handed thing, and and you're not thinking from the user perspective, like, well, first of all, if I have to take motion sickness pill to watch, that's a problem. Number one. Number two, there's areas that could be skipped, and you get feedback. Well, hey, wait a minute, I know you said you installed this way, but what exact tool did you need to? I'm confused. So, there's a different level.
They missed angles. They got hands in front of things. Yeah, I agree. The thing I always say is, don't make your training video a distraction to learning about the product.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's at that level that you can't learn about it because the quality is distracting, you're not accomplishing much.
No, it makes total sense.
In our 9th episode, we had Stephen Timmy and Melody Astley from Finlistic Solutions come in and talk about the alignment between sales and marketing. We touched on account-based marketing, which is really saying, you've got a product, you're selling the same product to the people in the organization, and there's going to be different reasons for different people in that organization of why they want to buy. And so the messaging needs to really reflect that. So they got into some great strategies on how to do that, and it really challenged, I know for me, my thoughts on how we might want to approach some of this. And so again, you definitely don't want to miss this episode, and or at least the recap on here, and see what they have to say about this.
The number one thing you have to do, it all starts with the client, and there's two things. One, what are they trying to get accomplished, right? Because if they're in the public domain, and they're getting better at this, is what I'm trying to do is digitally transform the business to have a greater customer experience. I'm trying to transform the business to have a greater workforce experience. I'm getting beat up by foreign competition, so I have to find a way to lower, cost per unit. We have, limited capital budget, so this equipment, I want to get as much out of it as possible. I want to have, greater capacity utilization. I want to have, and they'll talk about these things. So the number one thing you got to do is say, what are they really trying to get accomplished? And if they're private, they're all in the same industry, right? So you can look at the publicly traded ones and get some inferences into what the privately held companies want. So number one, what are they really trying to get accomplished? And the example I gave earlier, sure, this company is trying to take out cost, but what they were transforming was really how do we get product to market faster? How do we have this with this product proliferation? How do we have a greater in-stock position? So part was cost. The biggest part was about driving revenues. The second thing is, how are executives compensated? Which is a part that most people, either in the marketing side or sales side, almost always leave out. I mean, when we share with companies, okay, your clients, executives are compensated this way, they think we've got insider information. Like, how did you find that? Well, it's called the annual report. Okay, mm-hmm. So if they're compensated on growth, if they're compensated on some type of return measure, if they're compensated on safety, use that terminology. Don't come and say, we're here to improve your profitability, right? Or we're here to reduce costs. We're here to help you improve your EBITDA margin, if that's what they're compensated on. So you really got to know, what are they really trying to get done? And then two, if available, how are those executives compensated? Because that influences how they make decisions. A lot of times they'll say, our goal is to improve our profit margins from 10% to 12%, and it's real easy to figure out, they're looking for benefits of $100 million a year. Well, Danny, how much are you contributing? You come in and tell me you found $1 million of that $100 million. Somebody might be interested, but I, as an executive, it's too small.
Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of getting it into motion and putting it into your practice. So there are frameworks and things that you can use that we'll go through here in a minute, but I think about it in the concept of how can you help? And by how much? Now, when you say how can you help, that is automatically taking this outside-in view, thinking about the client. How can we help? We can help by taking out costs. Well, great. What are the elements, the drivers of cost takeout specifically that you can help with, and how much can you improve the efficiency, and where and when you can, what could be the potential financial benefits? So when you think about the how and the how much. Always, this is just a good place to start to kind of put yourself in the mind of your potential buyers. The other thing is when you have a big goal, a company goal that you can find in public domain and such, but if the goal is to improve operational efficiency, that's a big goal. Yeah. And so what are ways to break that down? If we all had a big goal in an organization, you're part of that responsibility functionally and tactically would be different than mine, would be different than Steven's in a big organization. So talking about how you pivot the message among the buyers in an organization, this framework is a way to help you deconstruct those goals into who is it? And then also the scorecard. How are you measured to show that you're moving the needle for the area you're responsible, for the area you're responsible for the area that I'm responsible for?
Danny, I want to build on what Melody said. If you look at something like this, it's not about the product, right? It's the marketing story about are you going to a store to buy a drill bit? No, what I really want is a hole. And in this case, right? You need analytics. No, what I really want to do is improve on-time delivery, and they're a part of it. And then just real quick, the other piece is once we've got our how story down, give me some especially at the executive level, give me some insights to how big this is. So for example, let's say we are really good at helping companies through sensors and everything reduce maintenance costs. You need to know your history, right? So let's say we know our history. We know on average we can reduce that by 10%. Well, I can't promise that to you, but I could say, hey, Danny, for a company your size, a 10% improvement. We work $30 million a year. Is that enough to get you interested, or should I take the earlier flight home? So sure. It's the how and then the how much.
All right, and that's our recap for all the episodes. We have a great first quarter run. We're very excited about what is coming up in the future episodes. We've got a ton of content and a lot of great resources coming in we're going to be talking about social media. We're going to be talking about scary things called millennials and what that's doing to the industry. We're going to come in and talk about lead generation tactics like how to use webinars. And we're going to talk to a lot of other manufacturing and industrial companies, your peers, to really get an understanding of what they're doing, what's working, lessons they've learned. And so you don't want to miss out as we roll out that next quarter. It's going to be very exciting. And so, as always, we would love your participation. So If you have any questions, you have a particular challenge that you're going through and you'd like some advice or some information, please submit your questions. We'd love to turn that into an episode to help answer that and address that. That's really the format, and that's really the goal of this show that we're doing. So, and if you do that, we'll send you a t-shirt. You can wear one of these great things. That'd be awesome. And also, if you really enjoy this, please share it. Join us on Facebook, and we're on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and probably a bunch of other areas as well. Oh, we're also on iTunes, so subscribe if you have a commute. If you live in Atlanta like we do, lots of traffic, that's a good medium. You're not doing anything else. So anyways, thanks again for watching. We look forward to continuing this conversation as we move into the next quarter. And until then, I guess just say John. I just added that. Thanks for watching.